Yeah, that's what. Yes.
All right. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Greenwood Common Council on Monday, October the 21st. This evening we have several Boy Scouts with us, so if you would stand, and they're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. After they're done, we're going to be led in prayer by Reverend Peebles of Greenwood United Methodist Church. Boys, just step right up here. It's all yours. Go right ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in prayer. Almighty God, creator of the universe, who created all in love, teach us to love all that is good and beautiful in this world. Teach us to honor the dignity of difference, recognizing that all are made in your image, and never forgetting that the people not like us are still people like us in every way, with hopes and dreams, and loving our neighbors. At this beautiful and critical moment in human history, we ask your blessings upon us that we may be a blessing to each other, and guide the nations of the world, and guide all the cities of the world, that we may honor you by honoring one another, and that by reaching out in love and hope, we may turn enemies into friends, strangers into neighbors and family here on earth, especially in Greenwood, Indiana. God of grace and God of love, bless the members of Greenwood City Council members and all citizens with your grace and your presence, and guide council members in their deliberations, that they may govern this city with wisdom, courage, and justice and compassion, bringing honor to your holy name, so that together we may become a beacon of your light to shine in all corners of the world. We pray this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. If you all step to the podium, state your name, troop number, and why you're here tonight.
Hello, my name is Hunter Meadows, and I'm here with 264, working on the Citizenship and Community Merit Badge.
Hello, I'm Elijah Farmer. I'm with Troop 264. I'm here working on merit badges. I don't know exactly which ones. I'm new to Scout. I'm new to Boy Scouts.
My name is Eric Whitelaw. I'm with Troop 264 and I'm working on merit badges.
Hi, my name is Jason Smith and I am here working on my communications merit badge.
Hi, my name is Caleb Farmer and I'm here with Troop 264. I'm working on my citizenship and the community merit badge.
Roll call.
Armstrong,
Here.
Bates,
Present.
Campbell,
Here.
Dine,
Here.
Foster,
Here.
Gibson,
Here.
Hill,
Here.
Hopper,
Here.
and Lexi.
Here.
We have a quorum. All of you on the council should have received copies of the minutes from our last regular meeting of October 7th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Bates. Second.
Second.
Second, Mr. Dine. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? Seeing in roll call on the minutes.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
and Lexi.
Aye.
Minutes are approved and voted 9-0. Reports, Corporation Council.
Should receive the semi-monthly item report and also the litigation report. If you have questions we can discuss at a public meeting, feel free to ask. Otherwise, please contact me.
All right. Controller? Committee and board reports, all of you should have received copies of my report from the last RDC meeting. I do apologize for getting those out late. I sent them out this afternoon, so you haven't seen them yet. If after you get them and read them, if you have any questions, please let me know. Any other committee or board reports? All right. This time we set aside an opportunity for residents that are here in the audience tonight to address the council concerning items that are on the agenda. If you would like to do so, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, moving on to ordinances and resolutions.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to move resolution 1922 to the front.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Hopper to move resolution 1922 to the front. Second by Ms. Gibson. Any discussion on that? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, resolution 1922 has been moved to the front. We'll consider that now. Resolution 1922. You need a motion?
Because you moved it to the top, but now you need,
I moved it. Open it for.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Foster.
Usually you read the caption.
Yeah.
Before we make a motion.
resolution authorizing the issuance of bonds for the purpose of providing funds to be applied for costs of public infrastructure projects and incidental expenses in connection therewith, currently refunding the City of Greenwood Qualified Midwestern Disaster Area Bond Series 2010 and paying the costs and expenses arising from the issuance of the bonds, sponsored by Campbell.
All right, any discussion on resolution 1922? Any questions for council that's here? See none, roll call, second reading, resolution 1922.
Armstrong,
Nay.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Donnie,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
and Lexi.
Aye.
Resolution 1922 passes second reading 8-1. Back to notice of intent to consider ordinance number 1940.
An ordinance to amend the official zoning map adopted by reference in zoning ordinance number 82-1 as amended, proposed rezoning and removal of approximately 28.25 acres for the South I-65 Worsville Road Overlay Zone District, sponsored by Dime.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lexi, second. Mr. Dine. Any questions? Go ahead. Would you like to explain what this is?
Sure.
Go right ahead.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Bill Davis, Director of Planning for the City of Greenwood. The rezone before you tonight is for a company called Lion's Head. They make precision metal products. They are requesting to take the property shown on the screen from the suburban fringe district to I-2. They do have a manufacturing use. It's more of a high-tech manufacturing use, but nonetheless, it is a manufacturing use. This is their proposed site plan. What is shown somewhat to the central southern portion of the site is what we're looking at tonight. They do anticipate expanding the building 2 more times. So that's why the building's located a little bit further south.
So that is why, whereas the condition number 3.
That's correct. We spoke about that at length at Planning Commission about how to make that wording work the best for protecting the city's interests, but also to protect the interest of our petitioner. If I skip ahead a little bit here, you'll see this middle elevation of the building. That is proposed to be a architectural steel wall. That's the north wall of the building. They anticipate that would be where the building would expand. So in the end, all of the building is going to resemble the elevation you have before you here. This is the view you would have traveling north on I-65. So the petitioner requested to work with the city on the northern elevation of the building so that they don't have to put up the precast walls and then immediately take them down.
All right, any questions or, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh no,
No.
that answers it up. Thank you.
Go right ahead.
Okay. When this went to Plan Commission, did get a unanimous favorable recommendation. There were the 4 conditions put on this as seen in the ordinance. We just touched on the one that had the most discussion, being the architecture. Since this is being removed from the overlay district, we want to make sure that that overlay district oversight is still in place. So this will still have to go to the overlay committee. We'll still have to have that architectural review, and it will still have to meet those same standards as if it was in the overlay district. With that, happy to answer any questions. Our petitioner is also here if you have questions for them.
The rationale behind removing it from the overlay district is distribution, or?
It's also manufacturing.
Yeah, it is manufacturing, so it has to come out of the overlay to be an allowed use.
Just a note on the council, if you're looking at this ordinance under the 3rd whereas clause, the ordinance you have in the bold things, it still says, doesn't tell us whether they made a favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation. It doesn't tell us what the vote is. Mr. Davis did just clarify that it was a favorable recommendation and it was unanimous vote, I believe, yes, as well. So when you sign it tonight, we will make that adjustment on that page, so you'll know that. Any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing it in roll call, ordinance 1940.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill.
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
and Armstrong.
Aye.
Resolution 1940 passes, voted 9-0. Resolution 1923.
A resolution establishing holidays for employees of the city of Greenwood for the year 2020, sponsored by Gibson.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Gibson, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dine. Any questions, discussions on the council? Seeing none, roll call. Resolution 1923, first reading.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill.
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
and Armstrong.
Aye. Did you get a vote, Mr. Bates?
So you got one more,
Who did I miss?
Mr. Bates.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Bates, sorry.
Aye.
Mr. Bates.
Resolution 1923 passes, first reading 9-0. Resolution 1927.
A resolution of the Greenwood Common Council expressing interest in the purchase of certain real properties for stormwater management, sponsored by Hill.
Do I have a motion? So, motion by Mr. Hill, second by Mr. Dine. Any questions or discussions on the council? Seeing none, roll call. Resolution 1927, first reading.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill.
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Bates,
Aye.
and Campbell.
Aye. Resolution 1927 passes, first reading 9-0. Second reading, ordinance 1928.
An ordinance fixing salaries of appointed officers and employees of the city of Greenwood, Indiana, and city utilities for the year 2020, sponsored by Campbell and Gibson.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Gibson, second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion on the council? Mr. Wright is here, if you have any questions. All right, see none, roll call, ordinance 1928, second reading.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill.
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Lexi,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Nay.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
and Dine.
Ordinance 1928,
Aye.
I'm sorry.
There's 9 of us.
I told the clerk earlier that I'm becoming more and more tolerant of other people's mistakes, hoping they'll be tolerant of mine. So I do apologize. Ordinance 1928 passes, second reading 8-1. Ordinance 1930.
An ordinance providing for an additional appropriation from the Motor Vehicle Highway MVH Fund to budget category 223, sponsored by Gibson.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Ms. Gibson, second. Second. By Mr. Dine. This is scheduled for a public hearing. So we'll open it up for a public hearing. If you would like to speak for or against ordinance 1930, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. See none. Close public hearing. Any discussion on the council? See none. Roll call. Ordinance 1930, second reading.
Gibson. Aye. Hill. Aye. Hopper. Aye. Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
And Foster.
Aye.
Ordinance 1930 passes second reading 9-0. Ordinance 1931.
An ordinance fixing the salary of the mayor of the city of Greenwood, Indiana for the year 2020, sponsored by Campbell, Foster, Gibson, Hill, and Hopper.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Lexi, second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call. Ordinance 1931, second reading.
Hill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Nay.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
And Gibson. Aye.
Ordinance 1931 passes second reading 8-1. Ordinance 1932.
An ordinance fixing the salary of the common council of the city of Greenwood, Indiana for the year 2020, sponsored by Campbell.
Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dine, second.
Second. Second.
Second by Mr. Hopper. Any discussion? Ordinance 1932. Seeing none, roll call. Ordinance 1932, second reading.
Hopper.
Nay.
Lexi.
Nay.
Armstrong.
Nay.
Bates.
Nay.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. And Hill.
Ordinance 1932 passes second reading 5-4. Ordinance 1933.
An ordinance fixing the salary of the city judge of the city of Greenwood, Indiana for the year 2020, sponsored by Gibson.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
By Ms. Gibson, second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call. Ordinance 1933, second reading.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Nay.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill.
Aye.
And Hopper.
Aye.
Ordinance 1933 passes second reading 8-1. Ordinance 1934.
An ordinance fixing the salary of the clerk of the city of Greenwood, Indiana for the year 2020, sponsored by Bates, Dine, Foster, Hill, Gibson, and Lexi.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Bates, second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call. Ordinance 1934, second reading.
Armstrong.
Nay.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
And Lexi.
Aye.
Ordinance 1934 passes second reading 8-1. Resolution 1919.
A resolution declaring certain real property improvements for tax abatement, GLA Properties 2 LLC, southeast corner of Collins Road and Stacy's Way, sponsored by Campbell and Hopper.
Do I have a motion? By Mr. Hopper, second. Second. Second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion on the council? Seeing none, roll call. Resolution 1919, second reading.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
And Armstrong.
Nay.
Resolution 1919 passes second reading 8-1. Resolution 1920.
A resolution declaring certain personal property for tax abatement, Quality Custom Distribution Services, Inc., sponsored by Campbell and Hopper.
Do I have a motion? By Mr. Hopper, second.
Second.
By Mr. Dine. Any discussion on the council? See none. Roll call, second reading, resolution 1920.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Bill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Nay.
And Bates.
Aye.
Resolution 1920 passes second reading 8-1. Ordinance 1927.
An ordinance for appropriations and tax rates for the 2020 budget year, sponsored by Campbell.
Do I have a motion? By Mr. Hopper, second. Second. By Mr. Dine. Any discussion on the council or questions for the controller? Seeing none, roll call, ordinance 1927, second reading.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Bill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Nay.
Bates.
Aye.
And Campbell.
Resolution 1927 passes second reading 8-1, or ordinance 1927. Ordinance 1937.
An ordinance transferring funds within the general fund for the fleet maintenance department from budget category 223, $3,000 to budget categories 333, 336, and 339, sponsored by Bates.
You have a motion
So moved.
by Mr. Hopper, second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion, ordinance 1937? Seeing none, roll call, second reading, ordinance 1937.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Bill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
And Dine.
Aye.
Ordinance 1937 passes second reading 9-0. Ordinance 1938.
An ordinance providing for additional appropriations from the aviation fund to budget classifications 222, $100,000, and 339, $8,000, sponsored by Gibson.
Do you have a motion? By Ms. Gibson, second.
Second.
By Mr. Hopper. This is scheduled for a public hearing. So we'll open it up for a public hearing. If you're here tonight and would wish to speak for or against ordinance 1938, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. See none, close the public hearing. For our Boy Scouts that are here, anytime there's the council, when we're doing that tonight, we pass a budget for every year. Anytime a department or the city wants to spend money that was not budgeted, that's called an additional appropriation, and that has to pass the council and have a public hearing. Unfortunately, all too often, nobody wants to speak at the public hearings, nobody comes to talk about it, but that's by law part of the process. So when we talk about additional appropriation, that's money that is outside of what was budgeted for that area, so just so you know. All right, any discussion on the council, ordinance 1938? Seeing none, roll call, ordinance 1938, second reading.
Gibson. Aye. Bill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Van Possen.
Aye.
Ordinance 1938 passes second reading 9-0. Ordinance 1939.
An ordinance amending the 2019 salary ordinance, Common Council Ordinance Number 1823, to add an additional senior building inspector position to the Department of Community Development Services, sponsored by Bates, Foster, and Gibson.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Ms. Gibson, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hopper. Any discussion on the council? Seeing none, roll call, ordinance 1939, second reading.
Bill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
And Gibson.
Ordinance 1939 passes second reading 9-0. Resolution 1925.
A resolution amending resolution number 1905, real property tax abatement of GLA Properties 2 LLC, sponsored by Campbell and Hopper.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Hopper, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion on the council?
What is the change on this?
It's like from 400,000 to 800,000 square foot, from 24 million to 46 million or something, off the top of my
The
head,
increasing
somewhere.
scope of the.
Okay,
Yeah.
just
Bigger.
make it bigger.
Yeah.
Bigger and better.
Bigger and better.
Bigger and more expensive. Any other discussion on the council? Seeing none, roll call. Resolution 1925, second reading.
Hopper.
Aye.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
And Donnie.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. And Hill.
Resolution 1925 passes second reading 9-0. All right, new business, introduction to new ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 1941.
An ordinance amending Chapter 6, Article 6 of the Greenwood Municipal Code 1993 as amended to amend certain provisions of nuisance law regarding vegetation and penalties, sponsored by Bates and Campbell.
If you all remember, several meetings ago now, Mr. Bates brought to our attention a house that had been cited by our code enforcement officers numerous times for long grass. They wouldn't mow the grass until they were cited, and then we wait till the end of the grace period to mow it, and then they wouldn't mow it again. Knowing that sometimes things can get exaggerated, I contacted code enforcement, and there was no exaggeration. These people have been cited 9 times this year for various ordinances, various violations. 4 or 5 of those were grass and vegetation. So I talked with code enforcement. They said that wasn't the only. In fact, when I gave them the address, the lady I talked to knew immediately what property that was. And they said it's not the only house in town where we have this kind of violation. And so we wanted to do something that would add some teeth to what they can do. And because right now, if they are cited and they mow the grass or whatever within the grace period, then there's no penalty whatsoever. And we have people going out there all the time. It's creating problems. So if I could summarize this, if I get it wrong, let me know. Basically what we did is we reduced the length of the vegetation from 12 to 8 inches before it has to be cut. It reduces the grace period for a violation of the vegetation from 10 days to 7 days. It also allows for a $100 penalty for if they repeat the same violation in a calendar year or have 3 citations of any kind within a calendar year. We can give them a $100 penalty. So we're hoping that this will help solve some of these issues. And so that's why this is before you, and wanted to let you know. Any questions about that?
Should we think about suspending the rules on this and at least get it through first reading? I know that the grass growing season is kind of over, but there's a lot of other issues that we have within the city, whereas code goes out there more and more. So
we could. I mean, we're really not a big rush, but we could. The violations of this property included abandoned vehicles, and there were other things. I forget now what all they were. Some were, at the time that I spoke with code enforcement, were in the process of being dealt with. So there were numerous citations on this property, all the way back to 2012.
Well, I'm aware of some other issues, even in my district, so
Yeah.
I'd like to move for suspension of the rules for
All right,
first reading.
Ms. Gibson makes a motion to suspend the rules on
Second.
ordinance 1941 through first reading. Mr. Bates seconds that. Any discussion on suspension? Seeing none, roll call on suspension.
Lexi.
Aye.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Donnie.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill. And Hopper.
Rules are suspended through first reading. Again, for our Boy Scouts, you've heard tonight talk about first readings and second readings. All ordinances or resolutions have to be voted on twice, so there's a first reading and a vote, a second reading and a vote. Tonight, on this and the next one, it's the introduction. So they're introduced at one meeting. Generally speaking, 2 weeks later, we'll have a first reading and a vote, and then 2 weeks after that, a second reading and a vote. But on this one, we're suspending the rules through first reading so we can introduce it and have first reading and a vote in one night. So instead of it taking 3 meetings, it'll only take 2 meetings. It does not require a unanimous vote on first suspension, but if we did try to suspend it all the way through in one night, it would require unanimous vote on the second vote. So we don't always get that far. So anyway, we have do I have a motion for first reading?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Dine, second by,
It was Ms. Gibson.
I'm sorry. Motion by Ms. Gibson, second by Mr. Dine. I forgot Mr. Dine out of order there. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
So the language reads that after repeat citation with the same violation or 3 or more citations for violations, you get assessed a $100 penalty. So is every violation thereafter is another $100 penalty?
Anytime you would get like 3 or more, you're gonna get topped with $100 is typically.
But if I had 2 grasses, I'm gonna get $100 penalty.
Yes,
right? 'Cause
if it's the
that's-
same.
and
You
on
have
the
one,
third,
you have the-
third violation, let's say I didn't learn my lesson, I get another $100 violation.
If you get, yes,
Third
you get up
grass,
to
or I
3.
get the 3.
Yeah.
That's
So-
called a slow learner.
Well, I'm just wondering if we should up the penalty by the time you get to the 3rd violation for the same.
Well,
If it needs to be a graduating scale that you're not learning.
In talking to the legal department, the problem with that is that once penalties start to add up and they get quite large, and then we file a lien and it goes to court, the judges normally just
Cut that out.
cut it out and don't, so it doesn't really help to tack all these on. They don't end up paying them anyway.
Also, if it's too punitive, they can't pay it.
If it's too
Give them a
punitive,
$5,000 fine.
right?
throw their hands
Yeah,
up.
well, and the judge isn't going to enforce it.
Yeah.
That's been the city's experience, is my
They won't
understanding.
cut the grass and they won't pay.
Yeah. So, the bottom line is, if we shorten it to 7 days, and if they don't cut it, then we can go in and cut it and then bill them, but you probably still run across the same thing.
But then we can lean the
But
problem.
eventually,
Yeah.
But then, yeah,
Yeah.
you file the
I have a
liens.
question. And then, on that topic, when we issue the citation, is that against the owner or the occupant, or how does that work?
It can be both. It's the
We do a
person
good
who
job of
owns
trying
it
to
or the
find the
person who's
owner.
using it, and a lot of times we cite both of them.
So we try to find the owner?
We do.
Okay, good.
Think you want to perfect the lien, you show the owner his notice and is aware.
Because the owner usually has the power to make something happen. The other question I have is on the reduction from 12 inches to 8 inches. I'm thinking about whether there are any sort of rural pieces of ground that almost like a little hayfield or anything like that in Greenwood still.
Well, there are exceptions. If you, I didn't show you the whole code, but under state law, if it's really agricultural property, they are exempt from us
Okay,
enforcing
good.
those types of high.
Because there's some
uses.
yards/fields that
Right,
maybe
if
they
it's
Well,
truly agricultural,
keep it 6
under the
inches.
statute, then
Yeah, the Walker property on Main Street, they farm that, and sometimes their weeds get taller than 12
Yeah,
inches.
that's Indiana.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, we do have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Questions? All right, roll call, ordinance 1941, first reading.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Hi.
Hill,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
and Lexi.
Aye.
Ordinance 1941 passes first reading 9-0. Resolution 1928.
a resolution approving an interlocal agreement between the City of Greenwood and Park Pleasant Community School Corporation regarding construction and installation of roads to provide access to jointly used parking, sponsored by Gibson and Hopper.
Gentlemen?
Still all day.
Rob Taggart, Director of Parks, presenting discussion for entering an interlocal agreement with Clark Pleasant School. As you guys may be aware, the city recently acquired the 40 acres there that you see on the right-hand side here recently, about a year ago, from NDOT due to the Portsville Road Interchange project. That project, Parks is under design development master planning in hopes of turning that into a ball diamond complex. In the desire of reaching the ball diamond complex, we need to talk about access. Clark Pleasant School and Harvest Bible are both building roads As you guys can see from the green shades and the blue shades, what we're asking for or introing tonight is the green section of the road. And the agreement would be to go in an interlocal agreement with Clark Pleasant School in the hopes of a reimbursement of the construction of that road from where it was of a school spec or a standard spec, and bringing that up to a city spec, ultimately deeding that back to the city. And in turn, we would have use of the parking lot, which is down there on the bottom right-hand corner. It'd be well over 450 spaces, but then in turn enable us to put more capital and more parking amenities into the proposed Paul Diamond complex.
Any hurry to get this done, Rob?
What's that?
Any hurry to get this done?
We hope to have things rolling by spring next year.
Any other questions?
But in terms of this agreement, we don't need to go to first reading or anything tonight. I mean, 3 meetings later, it's
No.
Okay, we'll fine.
All right. Any questions from the council? All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Miscellaneous business. This is the second opportunity for residents who are here in the audience tonight to address the council. At this time, it would be on items that are not on the agenda. So if you would like to address the council, please step forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. All right, seeing none, miscellaneous business. Council, just this is campaign season, and just a reminder that campaign signs cannot be placed in easements or right-of-ways. And so be careful about that. The code enforcement will enforce that. And if you put a sign in an easement or a right-of-way and it disappears, it may not be your opponent who's done that. So please, that's the law, so please honor that this campaign season. Any other miscellaneous business from the council?
I have one, Mr. President. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the administration for the work that's been done behind the scenes to see that Imperial Hills subdivision and the Rosengarten addition, their streets and curbs were rehabilitated over the last number of years. And recently, of course, that ended with the Rosengarten addition where I do live. And I'd like to again thank the administration for the work that they've done on the citizens' behalf there in the Pearl Hills and the Rosengarten addition.
All right, anyone else on the council? All right. Corporation Council?
We have a conflict of interest disclosure statement that we need to accept at a public meeting, so it may be filed with the state for Hurley Davis, who is a truck driver laborer, or his nephew Blake Davis, who will be a seasonal leaf and limb laborer, for any interest he may have in his earnings.
Do we have a motion to accept this?
So moved.
Motion, Mr. Alexi, second. Second, Mr. Hopper. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anything from the controller? Anything from the mayor's office? All right, seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were gone. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Please step to the podium. That'll give me time to sign some of these documents.
Just quickly, I want to announce that Mr. Bates, is what you referred to, the paving of your neighborhood was done with community crossing money.
Yes.
Once again, we applied for it, did a very good job on the application, and last week we were granted another $847,000 in some change in a matching grant for next year's project. So we'll be able to hit some more of the local neighborhoods and get those underway and try to keep everything in the best shape we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, are we done? Those of you on this end of the council, I have several documents here to sign, and you all need to sign them, so don't leave before you do. And we are adjourned.